All right, so welcome everybody. We're live. My name is Lisette, and I'm interviewing people and companies doing great things remotely. And today, all the way, I think from Philadelphia, I forgot to check before I got on the call. All right, all
That's
the way from
correct.
Philadelphia, Mike Tannenbaum. And Mike, you're the design strategist, consultant, and facilitator at Humanity LLC. You're also involved in a group called Leapers, I want to touch on a little bit later. You're an author of several books. We're going to talk about some of those. So I'm super excited to talk to you. But let's start with the first question, which is, what does your virtual office look like? What do you need to get your work done?
Sure. A laptop and a sane mind, I think. I was actually making a list of this earlier this morning, the software stack that I use. And I'm a big organizational junkie, both in terms of the way we work, like those organizations, but productivity systems. So for me, on one hand, pen and paper is where I do my best thinking, but work is a whole stack of software. Everything from Zoom and Bear I use for notes, things I use for projects. And then there's Evernote and Notion and Google Docs. And I mean, you've heard them all. Nothing you haven't heard of. Drafts is
No,
one
but
that
my
people
audience
haven't
hasn't heard of. Okay,
Yeah.
drafts? What does
Drafts
drafts do?
Drafts is actually a very simple, it's iOS only. So sorry for the Android people, but Drafts it's a content first writing app. So instead of having a thought and trying to figure out where you want to type it and write it if you're on the go, instead of figuring out what app to open to put your thought down in and then forgetting what your thought was as you're opening up that app, Drafts is an app where you pop it open and it gives you a blank screen. You start typing right away. And then you figure out where to put that information and those words later on, whenever you want. So it's have a thought, open the app, start typing. And then, every Friday I do a review of all of the ideas and notes and thoughts and things that have come across. But Draft is really a great way to just kind of capture and capture and capture, and then separate the process of capturing ideas and recording them from the process of organizing them and putting them in places.
Great idea. So in terms of the tools, you say you have this whole list of a variety of tools that you use, and that's one of the things that people struggle with remote working is just the number of tools that you have to learn. And in the past, it was just Microsoft Office because that's what everybody had. That we were forced to use the Office suite. Everybody in every company had it, and that was it. And now there's this huge plethora of tools out there to choose from. What advice would you give people in terms of like how many tools and what do you take on and how do you
use
solve
the
it?
ones that work for you. Use what works. Don't try to be, this can apply to life too, right? Like I've spent a lot of my life trying to be somebody that I'm not. And I probably still do that in my mid-30s, but when it comes to tools, I've spent a lot of time trying to use Notion as an example. It's the tool that everybody talks about. It's Rome Research is a new one that I haven't fully explored yet, but there's so many tools and there's a lot of opportunity to try to shoehorn a new tool, a new piece of software into a lifestyle or a workflow. But there's really no point to that other than the fact that like my lizard brain likes the shiny new thing. So I try the shiny new thing, but I already have a workflow. Like my workflow is great. I love it. I capture stuff, I move it through, I organize it. I know where it is. I can search for it and recall it from whatever place it is. So why would I break that? So for people that are looking to try a new tool or improve that system, just like take a step back. Don't think about the tool, think about the need. It's an exercise in user experience, customer experience design, whatever you want to call it. But take a step back and understand what is it that you're trying to solve for. Why are you looking for a new tool? Are you not capturing your idea? Are you forgetting ideas before you're able to write them down? Okay, so then maybe Draft is a thing that you can use. Do you have all of these ideas in all of these different places, but you have no system for organizing them? Okay, maybe you need some structure that can exist possibly on pen and paper. Bullet journaling. I don't do that, but people love the physicality of bullet journaling. So just like any design exercise, instead of trying to say, here's the solution for this problem that I think I have, step back and actually make sure that you understand the problem that you're solving for. Because with this whole suite of software that we all have available, and my monthly bill for software is more than I would like it to be. But the idea of, oh, sorry, Siri just kicked in. I don't know why Siri heard something. So there's another
Want to
one that
order
gets in
new
the way.
tools.
Yeah, apparently. Like, what are you trying to achieve? And what tool can help you get there? Maybe you don't even need a tool. Maybe you just need a mindset shift. But it's really about like, I work well with pen and paper. So grab a pen and paper, put away the computer. Don't do any Googling or searching and looking for a tool that can help you do a thing, and write down your requirements. Write down the challenges that you have. Go through a little personal exercise. It'll take 10 minutes, 15 minutes, but then you actually have an understanding of what is it I need. And then when you understand what you need, then you can spend too many hours doing research to look for the tools that might fit, and you can experiment with some of them. But that to me is the opposite approach of, oh, look at this shiny new thing, or I heard people love Notion, or I heard people love this, so I'm going to try to use this thing because.
Right. Yeah, I love it. I love that story because I used to collect everything on a virtual to-do list because I thought, oh yeah, I'm an ideas person. I'm always collecting ideas. But I would write it down on a sticky note first because it was just like it was just like a natural habit. I just wrote it down first. And then I would spend all this time transferring all my sticky notes into this virtual tool, or just have a stack of unruly sticky notes at the end of the week or month and then not know anything to do with them. So I eventually just gave up and I got the Full Focus Planner by Michael Hyatt. And this is my to-do list now. And it's totally not handy. I have to carry this book with me everywhere I go, right? It's like my brain. I could have it in an app in my pocket, which I already have anyway, but it works for me. So yeah, the advice goes, yeah, use what works for you, right?
That's
So
that's the best way I can sum that up is do the thing. And as you were talking, I was like, my eyes glanced over to the list of tools that I use, and like Things. I'm in the iOS ecosystem, so Things is the app that I use for. It has an inbox. It's a GTD, getting things done based approach. So it has an inbox where you just dump your idea, you dump your things, and then later on you sort them into projects or you sort them into areas. You add start dates, you add due dates. That system works for me, but it's actually not the one that I used to. I used to use Wunderlist, which was free from Microsoft before, or free from a separate company before it was shut down, acquired, and so then I migrated. But the idea of just capturing all of the stuff, that's the system, right? Capture all of the things and then figure out what to do with them later.
organize
And
it later.
if you use
Yeah.
Things, Todoist is cross-platform. So for people that aren't iOS, Todoist is there. And for, again, the goal to be able to grab all of that information when you want, just create it and deal with it later. That has worked really well for me because it helps me prioritize also. It helps me say, okay, I had these 37 ideas this week, but this one seems important, this one seems important, and the rest of them were just me having a coffee, thinking about a thing. I actually don't want to take action on that, so see you later.
Right, which is really good. That's probably like one of the things I struggle with most is I'm an ideas person. So I have a million ideas and only 24 hours in a day, 8 of which I have to sleep. And then I have to spend time with my family. So then there's, it's like all of a sudden you have to prioritize which things are you going to actually do. Okay, but what I would like to get into what you're doing with Humanity LLC, but I would also like to understand what was your journey to remote work and this way of working. Tell us how you got here.
Sure. So the here where I am, I'll make that very quick. I have been independent for 4 years, a little over 4 years, and I do a little bit of everything, but coaching, mostly facilitation work, I should say. So I do a lot of research. I do a lot of workshop design, leadership or strategy facilitation. I basically help some group of people, generally leadership teams or business owners. I help them gain understanding of complex situations, grab a whole bunch of data and information through research that I do, and then facilitate them making decisions about the steps that they want to take after. So that's the work that I do. We can dive more into that or not later on. In terms of how I got here, short version is I've had a lot of careers. I'm your typical millennial of just like job hopping and moving around and trying all these things. And I started a degree in finance and finished with a finance and in a communication school. So had already changed, went to different universities throughout that process, lived in Los Angeles for a little bit, working in the entertainment industry, moved back to Philly and found agencies and fell in love with agencies. And all of this was in-person work. None of this was, this was still when Skype was the thing, and it still never really worked. But
still doesn't.
Yeah, yes. From agencies, I ended up getting into tech, and I'm a giant nerd. I've been building computers and servers and websites and stuff since I was 9 or 12 or whatever. But I never wanted to do that. I never wanted to work in tech for a living, and I never wanted to work in music for a living because those are my loves, and I didn't want them to be all, corporate, capitalistic, whatever. Don't know if it was the right decision, but it was the decision. So through that journey, got to Philly. We didn't really have a big tech scene, but we had an emerging tech scene, and it was exciting. And I ended up landing a job at a startup, was a early employee, and we did the whole venture capital round, and we raised and we grew a team to 35 people from, 6 or 7. And through that process, we had Slack had been invented. I think it was 2015 came to market, and that's when I was working at this company. And before that, I actually don't even remember what the tool was that we were using. It was just instant message, probably ICQ or something from back in the day. But we had most of our people in the office in Philadelphia, but we were a tech company. So most people are like in their computers all the time, staring, typing, don't bother me, big old headphones on, and had to find a way to communicate. So we implemented some other software, and we started using Slack, and we started using Asana for project management. And we also had somebody that moved up to Boston. So then all of a sudden we were a core team in Philadelphia with a guy in Boston. And then 2 more people actually ended up moving to Boston. So we had 3 people in Boston, 20 something or 30 something in Philly. And we actually didn't really do it well at that point. Because we would have like all hands meetings, and then, oh, where's the Boston team? Like we would forget about the like out of sight, out of mind, even though they had been, one of them had been there before I was. But when you gather as a meeting, you generally go with the people that are around you. So I started with this fascination of the way that work gets done and the way that the teams access information, share information, communicate. Some people like being pinged on Slack or some instant messenger. Some people hate it. Some people love email. Some people hate it. Everybody's got a preference, opinions, they're everywhere. So that led to me just really diving into this world of organizational design and the way that work gets done. And not necessarily systems and processes and flows, even though that's part of it, but this deep fascination for taking things from idea stage, working together as people wherever we may be, and creating something and putting it out there in the world. So along that journey, I ended up leaving that company. We parted ways, and I went independent to address and try to explore the way that we do work, how organizations function, company culture, and that whole area. The first job I ever got as a freelancer was writing for a magazine, a publication in Philadelphia for like $60 for the piece. And it was all remote. I never met the office. It was just, I'm here in Philly, they're at a different place in Philly, but I did the work. We went back and forth over whatever video chat it was, and we did the thing. And somehow ended up picking up a writing client in New York. It was an agency that had gotten my name. They hired me for an article, again, fully remote. It was all on the phone, just did an interview, wrote the article. They hired me for 4 more articles. And that was not $60. It was agency level money. So like that grew. But the whole thing was done remote. Along that journey, I can also say that my wife had actually started working at Buffer, which is a fully distributed, completely, I think 55 something countries where they have a presence in, like an employee. There are only 90 something people, but a lot of people around the world. So she and I had been traveling, and we were in Spain. I'm trying to figure out what to do with my life, which is a recurring theme that we can, come back to if you want, but trying to figure out how to make some money, what kind of work I want to do, how to get involved. And she actually knew someone that works at an agency, a small design studio that was probably 5 or 6 people, but they were fully remote, completely remote, all Europe based, but they worked from their own places. So I got connected with them, and we ended up doing a project together. And I think where it got a little comical for me, in a good way, was the client was in San Francisco. So this European group of designers working with this San Francisco-based tech company hired me in Philadelphia, and we all collaborated on work. We dealt with the time zones, and we dealt with, at this point, it was Slack and it was Zoom, and we did all the whole stack of remote collaboration. But I was in a strategy role. I was in content strategy role. So it was a lot of messaging, positioning, storytelling, rebuilding of a website. making collateral. But there was a lot of interviews of people that worked on the client side. And then there was working with the team that was the expert, the design studio that actually owned that client relationship. So I was literally going back and forth, except it was all from right here. It was jumping from
Awesome.
San Francisco to Europe. And we figured out processes. They actually have done a lot of writing about how to best collaborate as remote workers.
Mm-hmm.
So it just became this immersive fascination with that. One of those relationships, we're still friends. I mean, I'm still friends with all of them. We've just lost touch a little bit, but one of those relationships really took off, and she and I ended up running a workshop online, and we called it Catalyst, and it was about communication in the workplace, and not specific to remote, but the event was, I mean, she was living in, I don't think she was in the Netherlands, but she's either living in Switzerland or London or over there. I was still here. And we ended up collaborating and bringing this entire event to life and hosted it on Crowdcast, which is another good platform for webinars and breakout rooms and all this stuff. And we had 30 something attendees that paid for it, and we're all over the world. So that was kind of my first foray into taking some of the in-person workshop stuff I've done and doing it by staring at a screen the way that we are now. And then it's only grown from there, but I'm going to just pause for a beat.
Yeah, I have tons of questions. So one of the things that we discussed before we started recording was your book, Clear Path Forward. And in this book, you said, I wrote down here, how to manage overwhelm. That's what I got from the website. But when we were talking, you were saying that it was a workbook to improve the way you work. But one of the things caught my attention. So one of them is, how do I work? Right? Like, how do I, as Lisette, do my things, and how do I like to be communicated with? But the other thing that I found really curious was how you have a section of the book, which is, how do we work together? So what's your preferred communication style? And how do we do this together? So I'd like to ask you about this book. Why did you write it? What was the need that you saw? And I'm really curious, about the process that you're using in order to create sort of these agreements together as a team for how to work.
Sure.
So let's start with, why did you write it?
Why did I write it? The complete no bullshit answer is because I wanted to see if I could make something, like actually create a thing for myself. And then I wanted to see if people would buy that thing if I offered it for sale. That was it.
All right.
It just so happened. So I was literally testing those two hypotheses. It just so happened that at that time, when I sat down to write, what came out was this manifesto about work. I mean, that's been the consulting work that I've done and some of the facilitation work that I've done in person. So it didn't come out of left field. My work had been evolving to this place of, it started with company culture, and I was having a lot of resistance from executives about company culture. And I'm like, okay, so if executives aren't willing to invest in some of this stuff, maybe we'll take a ground up approach, right? We'll take a grassroots approach, and we'll start working with the quote unquote individual contributors and the team leaders and the people that actually are doing the work. And we can address culture change from the ground up through them. So that kind of exploration paired with this desire to make things and put them online and see if people would buy them is what became this book. And it was a long process of writing. It took about 6 months. This is all self-published, just for people that are listening. All this stuff is self-published PDFs online, sold on Gumroad. So I'm not like a fully published, author, but it was a thing where I started writing and I started making worksheets. And there's a giant wall next to me that's, it's not whiteboard, but it's full of Post-it notes. And I had been planning a workshop about helping teams collaborate more effectively. And I hadn't shipped it. It was just sitting on this wall for a long time, card sorting and organizing all of these things. And I had been writing this thing to become a book. And I realized that what I had created as a workshop is actually, like, what was on the wall is actually really good material for what can be put into this book for addressing this problem of frustration within the workplace. And to your point about dealing with overwhelm, 100%, like, if you go look at my blog, MikeTannenbaum.com, the stuff that I've written over the years is largely about presence and mindfulness and addressing overwhelm and handling stress and, living with purpose. And again, typical millennial, but all of these things that we have at this kind of nexus of the internet rising and globalization and corporate structures falling and all of these systemic things, I like to write about that because I'm fascinated by it. And there's so much overwhelm in the workplace. Everybody's always busy. Everybody's always stressed. Everybody's working so many hours, especially in America. You know, an 8-hour workday, 9-hour workday is like chump change. So I just wanted to address that. So like all of these different factors and forces came together, and I ended up making these worksheets that would help people sit there and reflect. It's a pretty simple process that most people don't necessarily do. And I don't do it nearly as much as I would like to, but there's a lot that can come out of journaling and reflection and therapy and all sorts of self-exploration. So creating this book, I wanted to make it actionable. I didn't want to just write words. I wanted to give you something that you could do something with, and not just like be like, oh, that's a good idea. Or yeah, maybe I'll do something. Like, here's a thing that you can actually go do. And then I help you, like I guide you to set intentions. And as you go through the worksheets, it's, okay, so you just did this, you just learned this, here's some new ideas. Like, what are you going to go change? What's the thing that you can go change? It doesn't have to be this big, massive shift, but it definitely is, okay, I'm not going to leave my email inbox open on this monitor while you and I are having a conversation. Like, literally, what's the point of that? It's just going to distract me and probably bring me stress, because nobody gets really like great emails. Occasionally there's like a deal or something, but closing all of those things and single tasking, like that's a change a lot of people can make. Instead of, nobody's a good multitasker. There's tons of data out there. The research is anywhere. Just, you know, anybody can go search for it. But when you single task and when you focus, if Cal Newport and deep work, like when you really get in the zone, you get shit done in a lot faster than if you try to stretch it out over an 8-hour day. So I wanted to give people practical, actionable steps that they can take to improve the way they work. And then by doing so, that in turn addresses the overwhelm and the stress and all that other chaos stuff that's happening in, let's call it like the modern workplace.
Right. And what I like is you're taking these abstract concepts and sort of putting them and making them very tangible and actionable. And what I'm finding, and I don't know if it's the same thing, but when I go into companies and I try to help, I do something similar, and I call it, we'll create a team agreement for how are we going to work together? You know, like what are the expected response times and which platforms are we going to use? Because you're right. Some of us are email people. Like my husband's a phone person. I hate being called. I haven't picked up the phone in ages, right? Like unless it's my husband. And so, but you know, that would be good information for a team to know. So I think this book, Clear Path Forward, and I'll put a link in the show notes, is also a great way for, one, explore what is your working style, but also two, what is the style that you're going to have with your team? Because it's really important. You know, I had this colleague who would send me emails like it was an instant messaging system. So I would just get like one after another, like 20 emails, which is super easy to solve. Like you just delete the things that you don't need to respond to. But over time, you want to stop talking to this person. And on a remote team, I think that that's like the death bell, is when you want to stop talking to your colleagues because of how they're communicating with you. That's a solvable problem that should not get in the way. So I think that's really, I'm really curious how you've laid that out.
And sometimes, just to build, do we have a second to build on that? So
yeah,
sometimes I consume information in a way that's different than you consume information. There's almost 8 billion people in this world, and all, you know, there's all sorts of ways and personalities and styles of consumption and communication and skills and emotional intelligence, whatever you want to call it. But everyone has their own desire in those situations. There's a famous like XKCD comic of interrupting a developer. You know, developers like deep in the zone and they're solving this intense mathematical equation for hours. Someone taps them on the shoulder and they're just like, and then they have to start from scratch.
Right.
So like the shoulder tap is frustrating when you're in the zone and you're really doing like deep cognitive work. I don't necessarily mind a shoulder tap if it's in the middle of my day. Right now, it wouldn't be ideal, but like if I'm in an office or a co-working space and I'm going through emails and I'm doing stuff that's not really like that deep, I don't mind a shoulder tap. Actually, I kind of like it because it's a relationship thing and you get to have some fun. But when you're in a workplace, when you're on a team, and I haven't been on, so I work within teams a lot. I'm a freelancer as well. So a lot of my work is done through agencies where I join teams. And then I also do consulting with teams. But when I'm a part of teams and I become a peer, so to speak, of the organization, there's always communication issues and there's always like I think all the issues go back to communication, right? And setting expectations, and are we aligned around those expectations, and some fundamentals that we don't really take time to declare. But when I put Clear Path Forward out, I got not a lot of feedback. I didn't do a big marketing push, but I got feedback from some people. And a friend of mine who's a consultant actually started putting a table, kind of like you said, into her proposals, which is what I do with coaching clients and consulting engagements. I say, here's the tools that we use. Here's Slack, here's email, here's text message and phone call. Here's what they're used for. If it's urgent and you need me right now, send me a text message. I actually just added to my email signature yesterday. By the way, like, I don't have email on my phone. So if you're emailing me, before a meeting, or like, I'm just not going to see email, until I check email later. But the process of someone understanding what they need and what interruptions they don't want to have, and how they want to consume. But then, so that's really valuable for the individual, because then you can start to change those, your individual behaviors. But when you're a team and you're working together, especially remotely, when you don't quite have line of sight to someone's eyes, maybe you have some kind of workspace, or most likely you're just kind of in Slack all day long. But to understand how other people feel when you ping them, like, how do other people want to be communicated with? And how does your company suggest, my wife works with I mentioned this earlier, distributed company, and they actually they use Dropbox Paper, and they use Threads, and they use Slack, and they use like this massive suite of tools, but that's because each one has a discrete purpose. Here's like real-time communication back and forth as if it was a phone call. It's just instant message. That's what goes in Slack. Slack is not how I believe they do not use Slack for asynchronous work. They use either, I think it's Threads or Dropbox Paper or something like that. But like, if I need a response from you and I don't need it right now, but I need it, I wouldn't put that in Slack, because Slack may be disruptive to your workflow, or may ping somebody that doesn't need to see it. So again, stepping back, looking at what are my needs, but who are the people that I work with, and what are their needs? What are their preferences? How do they like to communicate? As an organization, can we make decisions to try something? And everything is always, a trial and error, right? You're never going to say like, here's a new tool. This is what we're going to use. Okay, cool. If you're not using it, you're fired. Like, that's just not going to work. So you can set an intention. You can say, we're going to try this channel for this channel for this, and this for this. And we're going to do that for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and see how it works. And then maybe you need a massive shift, a rip out and replace, or maybe you just need maybe you got the channels flipped up. So you can try something different, but like, set an intention, run an experiment, reflect on that experiment, and then try it again. It's like a cycle of learning, so to speak, which is, if when people go through Clear Path Forward, you'll see there's a cycle of learning, and there's a worksheet for that, literally to help you set an intention, run an experiment, reflect on that, and then go back and start that process over again.
Yeah, which I really love. And it's surprisingly hard to do, especially if you're a freelancer or solopreneur. It's really hard to do that with yourself. And I ended up hiring a business coach a year ago. And that's exactly the process that we go through. Is every week we run some experiments, we see what's the result, and then we design the next experiment based on that. And man, if I didn't have him coaching me every week and like pushing it and that accountability, I would get a lot less done. So
yeah, the accountability is huge.
Yeah, the accountability. So it seems to me, I have so many questions, and we're running out of time. And darn, I hate these things. Okay, but I've got a few questions. So one thing is you said you have now designed online workshops, and that you've delivered workshops online. And I'm really curious, because a lot of people are struggling with online workshops. They think it's going to be a webinar, and I can imagine it's not a webinar. It's an actual workshop that you've done online. So what are some of the things that you've done in your online workshops to make that interactive and engaging for the participants?
So it's a great question, and I'll keep it short in the spirit of time, but also admittedly, I only did the one online workshop. It was
Okay.
one with an intention of doing more. And that was 2 years ago, because that's how life works. So we put a lot of effort in. The woman that I did it with, her name is Lila, and she had much more experience working remotely, collaborating remotely. And ever since then, she has done so much more to kind of advance remote work and remote design thinking and remote collaboration sessions and design sprints. But we, at the time, we brought in a couple people that also were big in remote work and had a lot of experience. And we did our best to engage the audience it was through chat, And we had them, I think everybody was working with their own little Post-it notes as well. So, you know, we require ahead of time, here's the requirements, have a pen, some Post-it notes, 3x5 cards, and we would give prompts. We would ask them to, you know, go through the exercises on their own. I think there were some awkward silences, but, you know, sometimes that's good. And then they would share through that. And it ended up working well, but it was definitely, we intentionally made sure that the presenters were not presenting. They were a little bit of presenting and then facilitating this conversation. And I'm sad to say that I don't necessarily remember exactly how we did it.
No, but I think you came up with the key point that you came up with that was, though, is do a little bit of presenting. And then after that, do a facilitating of conversation.
People are going to tune out if you don't do it that way. People, if it's just me talking at you, and this is a podcast, so I mean, we're having a conversation here, but if it's just me talking at you for 2 hours, which is what we block the session, then people are going to have 47 different tabs open and they're going to go make a cup of tea and
do whatever you do during webinars.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And everybody signs up and nobody actually listens. So finding ways, just like in person, right? Like it's a little harder to read the room online. But I think we did have a gallery view of the people that were participating. So we saw everybody's faces. So people had a little bit of social pressure. Sounds negative, but people had a little bit of that kind of accountability to like be present. And if you're there on your mobile, whatever, like you would come back. But if on a webinar, it's just me and a bunch of slides, or maybe just a bunch of slides, and I would get up and walk away from me if it was just me presenting. But if there's opportunity to interact and for me to sit down, okay, here's a worksheet that we're going to do, and here's some thought prompts, and here's, okay, now let's have a conversation and facilitating, you know, raise your hand if you have something to say, and making, again, like highly facilitated to make sure that people don't talk over each other, but that everyone has a chance to talk. So it's just, again, it's a design exercise of what are the constraints of the environment that we're in? What is the need that people are looking to, you know, the problem that they're looking to solve? What do we want to give people? What do they want to get out of this? And then how do we design a session online that helps keep people engaged while also doing all of that stuff? And it sounds like a ton of work, but we came up with something and we ran it. It was an experiment. It was more successful than it was successful. We just didn't keep going.
Right. Yeah, I've done the same thing. I ran a conference once, super successful. Everybody wanted it, and I thought, I can't do it the next year. You know, it's just like, okay, that was a good conference, a one-off, and I meant to do it again and never. Yeah, life gives you weird, unexpected things. Speaking of, so I want to bring up, let's see. So one of the reasons why I contacted you was because I was told that you knew how to collaborate as an independent, working in companies and virtually. So I want to talk about a little bit about maybe what that means. So what does that mean to you, collaborating as an independent, working in companies and virtually?
Yeah, so that's actually the thing that has my most attention, or most of my attention right now. Over 4 years of independent work, I have been labeled freelancer, contractor, consultant, coach, temporary employee, all the things. I don't really care for labels, so call me whatever you want. But some projects, I lead them. I close the client, I do the work, they're my client, it's our relationship, it's me leading the charge. Other engagements are an agency or consultancy closes a client or has an existing client, and for whatever reason, they don't have someone to be able to do what they need to do, even though they close that deal. So they hire me, and always through a referral. Like as an independent, all of my work, all but one of my projects has been referral based. Hey, here's Mike, he can solve your problem. Maybe solve your problem. And I have done, it's like rapid embedding. So I'll go join an agency. A lot of it's in person, I'll say that, but a couple of them have been remote engagements. And it requires, any freelancers and independents listen to this, you're most likely no strangers to this, but you have to rapidly build rapport with a team, whether in person or remote. You still have to build rapport. You have to build trust. You have to, come out with like hey, I'm Mike, I'm here to do this. I was hired to do this. Like, I'm here to help you. Please don't be threatened. But you have to build that rapport, and you have to understand the culture of the organization. You have to understand and be aligned around like what exactly is going to happen and what exactly are my roles and responsibilities of the work that I was hired to do. Because most of the time when someone's hiring someone like me, especially from an agency side, they're moving so quickly that they're not able to put all the pieces together, which is why they hire me to come in and quickly do all of these things. So that leads to not necessarily fully scoped or properly scoped projects, not quite the alignment that's internal that's necessary, but both in person and remote, it's really just a matter of like, you have to build trust so quickly. Trust building takes time. So it's really tough to like to just like 0 to 60. But by being in these environments and finding, having a common goal obviously helps, being open and honest and, dare I say, authentic, but like I show up as myself and, professional me, but I show up as myself. We may have Zoom calls. Sometimes if it's a remote project, we'll do video chats just for shits and giggles, just so that we can get to know each other and have a conversation, because that's what it takes. And then we'll get into the work. Just like you and I chatted for a little bit before this, and now we're doing the recording. I would go have coffee with people, or I would have a virtual coffee with someone and just get to know you and get to know the rest of the team, so that when it comes time to do the work, we have some rapport, we have some trust, and we're able to actually jump into it. So over the 4 years, I've done, I don't know, a dozen something different of these like immersions where I join an agency or I join a consultancy and end up basically acting as like staff augmentation. Is I work with their team. And it's increasingly that's what's happening. And that's not what I set out to do, not what I wanted to do, but I enjoy it. I have fun, good work, good people, ideally pays well. Those are my 3 criteria for work. And it's been a really great way to work with some really smart people, to learn about some new industries, to pick up some new skills, to apply my existing skills in new areas. And through the collaboration component, it's just fun. It's not only solving the problems of the client. We need a strategy. We need an email strategy. We need an operations strategy. We need executive alignment. We're planning, like, it's like, that's the deliverable. But along the way, there's this whole other area of, okay, I've never met you, but we're delivering on this client, like this massive client project. So like, let's be friends. Let's have a Slack chat and, do like, that's a whole other part of work that when you're a full-time employee, you don't really have to do that. Like, yeah, you got to build relationships, and sadly there's politics in organizations, but you don't have the pressure of time. You may have deadlines, but like, it's different when you're a full-time employee with no like end date where things need to be delivered versus being an independent, where it's like, okay, I have 6 weeks to get to know your team, get to know your culture, understand an industry that I may or may not know anything about, actually understand this project, help adjust the scope of this project because it wasn't scoped properly, and then actually do the work. But also, in order to do the work, I need your email address. Like, I need an email address from your company. I need access to your Slack. I need access to your Google Drive. I need access to Mike, like all the places. And there's this whole onboarding process that is cumbersome and full of friction. And that's actually what I'm solving right now. I haven't put anything out there yet, but have a whole maybe course coming out or email thing or some more worksheets, because I love making worksheets, but helping people explore what it takes to collaborate in these kind of ad hoc, we come together, we band together for a project. We need to do all those things I said very quickly, and then we're going to go separate ways. It all starts with intention, just like I said the whole time. Take a step back. What actually needs to happen? How do we think we could be most effective at this? And then let's try something and see what happens.
So could you ever go back to the 9 to 5 job?
No. I think about it all the time. I crave stability and consistency and those things. I'm a human. It'd be nice to have those, but who knows what the future holds. I may end up in a 9 to 5 job at some point, but it would be sad. I would be sad.
But it's an emergency situation or something.
Yeah. And like the way the world works also, if I were to take a job, if I were to take a job like that, it would be with a company that, cares less about the 9 to 5 and the hours clocked and more about the output. It doesn't have to be a fully distributed company, but like, there's so much pressure. Employees and the workforce now, we have so much purchasing power, right? Like, top talent can go independent. They can start agencies. The barrier to starting companies to being independent is so low that barrier to entry is so low that it's easy for the people that want to, it's easier than ever for people that want to go do that independent pursuit to do that, which puts a lot of pressure on organizations to figure out how to attract and retain the talent that they need to have. So even though it's a shift that's taking longer, I mean, it takes a long time to steer the Titanic, right? But like, even though it's a shift that's taking longer than I think many of us, if not all of us, would desire, we're starting to see these large organizations and companies do things, implement flexible working. You know, I'm in the US where still parental leave is a conversation that we have to have. And, you know, if you're a father, maybe you get 2 weeks, maybe, but
yeah, which is crazy in Europe.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
it's
no.
crazy.
We'll save that for another time, but
Yeah, it's another conversation.
The organizations are needing to adapt, and the ones that don't are not going to be successful in hiring the future of the workforce. And I mean, like, people that are younger than me that actually, that, you know, I grew up on the internet, but there's people that I didn't grow up with smartphones, right? There's people that are actually like literally grew up, they're the true digital natives, so to speak. And
right.
they have different demands of a workforce. So organizations need to make these shifts in order to get top talent. And if I were to find an organization that does good work and it's with good people and it pays well and it's meaningful and it's full of purpose and I, you know, all of those things, I wouldn't be opposed to a role like that, but it certainly wouldn't be a 9 to 5.
Right. Seems like a really outdated concept anyway. I mean, like, why?
It is.
Like, in a global world and a global workforce.
It's an industrial era thing.
Right.
Purely.
Right. It's time to change. I see it also too. Oh man, I have so many questions for you, but we are coming to the end of the time. So I guess I'm gonna end up with the last two. And the one is, for people who are just starting out, who are maybe thinking about going independent, they're in these 9 to 5. I call them day prisons, but okay, some of them are really good. But okay, so if you're just starting out, what advice would you give?
Be kind to yourself. That's not going to help you get clients, and it's not going to help you do it. But oh my God, be kind to yourself.
What do you mean by that?
I have this wall full of Post-it notes here that are, you know, reminders to myself. This one, give yourself space to create. And there's all sorts of other ones. And I put these here because I beat the crap out of myself in this process. Oh, I'm not doing the work I want to do. I don't have the client that I want to have. It's never about delivery. It's always about the lifestyle. I'm not, you know, earning the money that I want to be earning, but like, these things take time. And I've been independent for 4 years and I don't feel like it's sustainable. Like, I'll be perfectly honest. It's a tough journey. It's hard as hell. I think about throwing in the towel a lot, but my whole life I've literally wanted freedom and independence in a work style. So like, I can't let that go. So for those who are considering this, I always wanted this pursuit, and I've read all these books about how hard it is to be an entrepreneur or less about freelancer, more about like entrepreneur or founder startup, because that was kind of the sexy things that were all in the magazines. And all I wanted was that stuff. And you hear these conversations about failure, and I would just nod along. Yeah, failure is important. Failure is hard. And the mental game. Yeah, it's about the mental game. But like, I had no idea what I was getting into. And it is grueling and exhausting. Call me, anybody. If you're listening to this and you're thinking about this, find my information, shoot me an email, call me. But like, it's hard to maintain the attitude. Like, it's a mental game. It's pure, you know, It's a mental game. So finding practices that can help you manage literally your mental well-being, your mood, your energy, your highs and your lows. If you need a therapist, please call a therapist. I will point you to a therapist, but like, you know, there's coaches and there's therapists, coaches forward looking, therapists backward looking, but like, there's a whole world of mental, like mindset shifts and mindset challenges personally that I deal with, that I thought that I was the only one dealing with. And turns out I'm not. I mean, I don't think I was naive enough to actually think I was the only one, but like, leapers.co. You mentioned that at the beginning. Leapers is in, I took the leap. This is not my group, but I am a part of it. It is a community, and it's an organization. It's a Slack channel, and there's a podcast, and Matthew produces so much content and raises kids. I don't know how he does it. But it's literally a group for people like us that are working independently or are considering working independently. You have the tiniest iota of desire to go, you know, pursue this life. Leapers is a great resource that increasingly is focused on mental health and well-being and wellness of independents, of freelancers and self-employed. So
love it.
Yeah. The advice is to build a support system. Build a support system for yourself, because when it's good and it's going, you don't need that support system. But when it's not good and it's not going and you crash, it's really hard. So like, be prepared for that stuff.
Yeah, and you don't have a lot of control over when it's going to happen. Things
Not at
crash
all.
for the weirdest reasons. And just one last thing to mention, because we were talking about this before too, but with like coronavirus, which is something that's just starting now. So when this podcast airs, it'll be April, like the beginning of April. So we'll see what happens at the beginning of April. But, you know, those are the black swan kind of events that sort of like crush into life. And all of a sudden you're on, you know, I've got colleagues who are homebound in China. They're not allowed to leave their homes at the moment. They have to work, you know, so they're figuring out. So these are weird things that happen. So yes, I really love your advice. Be kind to yourself and build a support system, because it will happen. We just don't know when and how. It's just weird things happen. That's what life's all about. So really, really good advice. And I will second your system on that. Being a freelancer or a solopreneur, an entrepreneur is grueling. It is a constant hustle. So yeah, I second that. It looks glamorous, man. When it goes well, it sure looks glamorous. And when it's not going well, it's we don't put that on Facebook, shall we say?
It sounded so good up front, and I'm happy with it. Like, I would rather be where I am than the other alternative Mikes that could be living in like bizarro land. But I think that my intellectual recognition of this is a hard path, the difference between the chasm between that, like, you know, intellectual recognition and the reality of I don't, you know,
right, like this actually is hard.
Fill in curse words here, but like the reality of what it's like. I thought that I knew what I was getting into. I thought that I knew what I was prepared for, and it's just hard. It's exhausting. There's tears, there's crying, there's therapy. Maybe other people don't go through this, but I talk to plenty of people that do. And it's just,
me too.
However, I'm wired this way. I think I make a bad employee. Future employers, if you're listening, don't listen to that. But I'm wired this way. And that's like, I don't think I can get away from it. And sometimes I'm sad by that, because I wish I could just be easier and get a job that pays good money and gives me what I want, and I can do my vacations and raise my family and all those things. But like, I can't. I literally can't. So, you know, there's some tough choices that you need to make if you're considering this stuff, but also just try it. Find a way to try it. I won't go on a long tangent here, but like, if you're in a place and you're considering this leap, some kind of leap, find a way to test and learn before you make that massive leap where all of a sudden your income is like your life is dependent on your income, and your income is uncertain. Find an experiment, pick up a freelance client, do some moonlighting, put in extra hours, take a reduction of hours at your job, drop to 30 hours, drop part-time, but whatever it is, find a way to test the water. I'm from Philly, I say water. Find a way to test the water and see if it's a lifestyle that would actually work for you. That's the best, like, experience is the best way to learn.
Yeah, dip your toe in first before jumping in, that's for sure. All right, final question. What's the best place if people want to find more about you? What is the best place to find you online? So
MikeTannenbaum.com, which I could spell for you, but it's a big
I'll put it in the show notes.
Sure, it'll be in the show notes.
For sure.
But MikeTannenbaum.com has links to essays and my newsletter, some coaching information, all the resources. You can find the workbooks there. We'll put that in the show notes as well. But MikeTannenbaum.com will be the launching point for all of that stuff.
Brilliant. Mike, I know I said we were only going to talk for 30 minutes, and now it's been almost an hour. So thank you so much for indulging me. But I just I made copious notes on pen and paper, so there's going to be a lot in the show notes. But I really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Yes, it's been a pleasure, and thanks to the producer for making copious edits.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. All right, and until next time, everybody, be powerful.